You're listening to the Martin Clinic Wellness Podcast. This is the show where we bring you the best tips, tricks, and nutritional hacks to help you and your family get healthier. You will also hear what works and doesn't work so you don't have to waste your time and money. All right, let's get started. Well, we want to thank you for joining us on today's podcast. This is episode number 98. We're only a couple episodes away from our 100th, and we'll do something special on our 100th episode upcoming. Today we're going to talk about, we just finished a new course that we made, really a home program for hormonal issues called the Metabolic Storm. And, we launched that earlier this year. And we came across, really it was a news report that talked about just the massive increase in thyroid cancers.
Yeah.
In fact, they're talking about over the last 20 years, it's tripled. So, it's incredible. Thyroid cancers are on the, they're on the rise. Thyroid issues, aside even from cancer, big issues. We see it all the time in the clinic.
Yep.
Let's talk a little bit about why there's such a drastic increase in thyroid cancers.
Yeah, and by the way, they rarely happen to men. It's not that men don't have thyroids. Of course we do. But the rapid increase is not happening so much in men, but in women. And that doesn't surprise us at the Martin Clinic because the whole course on Metabolic Storm was really aimed at women and how their endocrine system functions. Especially the thyroid does not act independently. We really emphasize that thyroid, is you might get thyroid cancer, but the thyroid on its own rarely acts independently. It's always something else usually that's causing the thyroid to not work properly or to have cancer develop in it.
And that's what makes the thyroid a stinker, really. A person can have every symptom in the book of a thyroid. How many times do we hear this? A woman will take read up on thyroid symptoms, and will literally have every one of them: low energy, dry skin, eyebrows, weight gain,
constipation.
And then they go get their thyroid tested, and it comes back normal.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and this happens a lot as well, they get their thyroid tested, it comes back they have an issue. They get on Synthroid, which is a drug for low thyroid, and the levels come back normal, but they still feel the same way.
Yeah.
So the thyroid already is a stinker. But what we're starting to see now is that it's becoming a source of cancer for a lot of women. So, and there's a lot of different reasons for it. And, if you look at the news story, they'll try to give some reasons for it. But we're going to give our own reasons why we think that there's been a massive increase in thyroid cancer and other endocrine cancers. Some of these will spill over to breast cancer as some of the causes for that. But let's talk about that. So let's just kind of list some of the bigger reasons, and we'll kind of talk our way through this a little bit just to help everybody understand why this is happening. So let's just talk about the first one that is a big one.
Yeah, well, I really often see this in my office. You look at what makes things grow, right? Like growth hormones, right? So, in our office, like we look at this all the time because we're seeing the effects of insulin. That's food, right?
Yeah, and insulin is a powerful growth hormone.
Yeah. You can use it for good. Weightlifters often do, right? They can really build muscle by increasing their insulin levels. The problem is that today, the average person in the USA, Canada, are consuming 160 pounds of sugar, 160 pounds of flour, and insulin is a growth hormone and it's a food hormone. And I believe it's one of the number one reasons that, like thyroid cancer, we're losing the war on cancer because, cancer is...
even in Canada, look at that news report that came out that said 1 in 2 Canadians are going to get cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 2.
Yeah.
how in the world can they continue to collect money for cancer research, talking about how we're winning the war on cancer, and then they put out their own statistics, which shoots himself on the foot? Man, we should be demanding results for that kind of money.
Yeah.
It is big bucks.
Yeah.
Those, pink ribbon and March for the Cure and all those things, there are big money involved in that. And I think it's about time we start to see some results from all that money that's going in there.
Nobody wants to take on cancer because, it's like mother and apple pie, right? Like you can't say, because who hasn't been affected by cancer? And everybody wants to win the war.
Everybody's been affected by cancer.
There's in the family that is listening to us today.
Our family's been personally affected by cancer.
Yeah, cancer. So everybody, look, we must continue the war. Yeah, but it's like.
But you got to fight the battle in the right field.
If you're in, one of the Americans, the longest war they've ever been involved with is Afghanistan. To think. Have they actually won anything there? Like, has anything changed? I don't know. I don't want to get political. That's not the point. But it's time to analyze how many dollars are spent, how many lives are lost, how many, what it costs the taxpayer to fund, the care of cancer. And then we have a statistic like this thrown at us. Well, thyroid cancer is tripling. And, I asked the question, why? Why is it tripling? Why is breast cancer worse than it used to be in the 1970s?
Well, even on that, like you had mentioned about growth hormones, insulin, for example, which is a powerful growth hormone. Studies have shown that even breast cancer, they have a lot more receptors, glucose receptors. So we've talked about this before on previous podcasts, but insulin definitely plays a role in the increase in cancers that we're seeing, especially in these endocrine type of cancers, right? For example, like you think of what the effect that insulin has on the thyroid, right? Yeah. I mean, the thyroid makes a few hormones, mainly makes a hormone called T4. And, T4 in itself has to be converted into T3 because T3 is the active form of the thyroid hormone that your body uses. So T4 has got to be converted into T3. And of course, that conversion takes place in the liver. Unfortunately, somebody who has an insulin issue, especially insulin resistance and especially insulin, all these fatty livers and stuff like that, well, that is going to directly affect the ability to convert T4 to T3. So insulin will affect the thyroid. Yeah. It will cause the thyroid to work harder. It will cause the thyroid to grow. Insulin makes everything grow, which is why, as funny as it is, one of the, if somebody's asking, well, what are some of the signs of insulin resistance? Well, think of all the things that grow, right? A lot of skin tags. Skin tags is a sign of insulin resistance. Yeah. Insulin makes skin tags grow. I mean, it's a growth hormone. Yeah. So again, thyroid cancer, it overworks. Insulin will stress the thyroid. We'll get it to overwork, will cause a whole bunch of metabolic issues, and that could definitely possibly be a reason for the increase that we see in thyroid cancers. Definitely breast cancers.
Yeah, and coming back to the thyroid, and once you get a cancer, once you have a tumor in the thyroid, well, guess what makes it grow? Insulin. So again, this is a food. Insulin, folks, is a food hormone. It's 100% coming from what you put in your mouth every day. So, this is why I think we're so consistent on talking low carb, get out the crappy carbs out of your diet because it'll lower your insulin.
Yeah. Processed carbs and sugars are,
that 160 pounds of sugar, 160 pounds of flour. My word, think about it. That's 320 pounds of your pancreas going crazy.
Yeah,
right?
Insulin, it has to secrete insulin. It has to do all these things, right? Yeah. So let's talk about a second reason. So insulin, which, anybody who's listened to our podcast for a while knew that we would start off with insulin because, again, it comes into play for so many different things. But let's talk a little bit about a second big reason, probably just right up there with insulin when in women, which is estrogen dominance.
Yeah, and boy, do we see a lot of that. I could literally, I think I've said this to my staff a few times. I could literally never see another man in the office, would be busy as all get out and just deal with estrogen dominance.
Let's talk real quickly about what it means to be estrogen dominant. Well, first of all, the idea of estrogen dominance, what they're basically saying is that estrogen is dominant compared to progesterone.
Yeah, it's always a balance, right?
You're supposed to have a normal ratio or a normal balance of estrogen to progesterone. So if estrogen dominant, which means the ratio of estrogen to progesterone is off, and there's a few ways that can happen, right? You can have too much estrogen and normal progesterone, and that's estrogen dominance. You can have normal estrogen and too low of progesterone, and that'll cause estrogen dominance. Mm-hmm. Or which we see a lot as well, you can have high estrogen and low progesterone, kind of a double whammy, and that creates estrogen dominance. So what happens is you have basically too much estrogen.
Yeah.
And too much of the, estrogen can be metabolized a few different ways. It's not the good estrogen. It's the bad one.
Yeah.
And, aside from the fact that estrogen dominance will always lead to fat gain, always. Estrogen, when somebody has too much estrogen, it just shuts down their metabolism. They'll end up storing more fat. They'll make more insulin. They'll make more estrogen. They'll store more fat, make more insulin, make more estrogen. Yeah. It's a
double
vicious
whammo. Oh, and these are women that I see every day.
And they're eating 1,500
right?
calories a day, and they're gaining weight like crazy.
Yeah, like Doc, you have no idea. This is quote, okay? Doc, you have no idea how much I exercise, and how little I eat, and how much I gain weight. And they don't have to convince me, right?
No, we see it.
Because, I think you probably would have to convince your physician.
Yeah, they would just think, the physician or a lot of people look at them and just think they're lazy, which is
because they never
so
test
frustrating.
Hormones, first of all. And, in our clinic, we test for estrogen dominance. And I'm telling you, like I said, I could turn my practice over now. At the Martin Clinic, it'd be all women and be just estrogen dominance. And it's absolutely insane. But your thyroid, again, coming back to the thyroid cancer, the thyroid on its own does not act alone. And, the fact that your ovaries are secreting that much estrogen is, absolutely devastating to the thyroid. And, they very much go hand in hand, right? So, it's pretty well, it's just something that we see so often in our clinic today.
Well, and again, what we talked about this before, but a few things will happen when you have too much estrogen, right? One of the things that's going to happen, again, is too much estrogen will block that conversion of T4 to T3. Again, that will lead to symptoms of low thyroid, but it'll also make your thyroid be working harder to try to correct that issue. And again, an overworked thyroid can lead to problems. That's the first thing. Also, what's interesting with too much estrogen is it actually can block the uptake of thyroid hormone in your cells. So it can actually affect the way that the thyroid works in your body. So again, estrogen dominance, we wrote a report on this a while ago, and how, kind of the hidden cause of thyroid issues, which for a lot of women is estrogen dominance. They got an estrogen issue that's masquerading as a thyroid problem. Mm-hmm. But if that happens for too long, then easily what happens is the thyroid overworks, gets defective, throw a little bit of insulin in there, and it just creates a absolute, what we call a metabolic storm, which is what we named our course. So that's another big one as well. So, and again, how do people become estrogen dominant? Insulin, absolutely. We talked about that. Xenoestrogens, right? That's a big word. Xenoestrogens is just a fancy way of saying that the chemical mimics estrogen. For all intensive purposes, your body thinks it's estrogen. And our skin is our largest organ. Cosmetics are laced with these xenoestrogens. Yeah. So you're putting these chemicals on your skin. Your body thinks it's full of estrogen. Progesterone gets messed up, everything. It just creates this cascading effect in women. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and we live in a toxic soup, right? We really do. It's so hard to avoid. You almost have to leave the planet not to be exposed to xenoestrogens. Your shampoo, underarm, aluminum, in the underarm deodorants, in the air sprays, the we've talked about this in the past, hand sanitizers and things like that. They're just all xenoestrogens. They're just in almost every chemical that you can think mimics estrogen.
Well, you know what's interesting is we wrote a newsletter about this week on sunscreen.
Sunscreens, there's one.
And, they decided to finally start testing what happens if you put sunscreen on, and one of the most common ingredients in sunscreen, because, that's pretty much in most sunscreens because its ability to absorb UV lights. And they tested this chemical, what happens if you introduce it to chlorine, which of course is in swimming pools and, bromides, for example, which is in some lakes and even that, right? So they wanted to see what happens, in a real world situation where you throw a little bit of heat, which is how you accelerate any chemical reaction. So you throw the sun in there, you throw on some sunscreen, and then you go swimming. And what they found is that when you introduce chlorine to the equation, that this chemical that's used in sunscreen actually breaks down into some pretty dangerous stuff. In fact, one of the things that breaks down to is one of the very components of tear gas. That's how. So it's interesting. You put these. So you can imagine what happens with all these lotions, right? You put these lotions on your skin. You throw a little sunlight into the equation, and you go swimming.
That's your Bunsen burner in high school.
It is. That's right. That's exactly what it is. People don't understand.
Sun, right?
Chemical reactions. Throw a little bit of heat. It accelerates a chemical reaction, right?
Yeah.
So
you know what? And just a little point, because when you think of the emphasis. There's certain cancers that win wars, right? Like they win wars in the sense of the media war. And, skin cancer has won the media war because everything that I ever
it's every
read,
time.
Stay out of the sun or wear sunscreens, right?
Even the Sudbury police, on Twitter, I just follow their their account to just out of curiosity. And, they even tweeted out, it's a nice sunny day. Make sure you wear sunscreen. Yeah. Right? It's been hammered
part
in.
of the weather forecast in North America has, and today's UV rating is, right?
Yeah.
So stay out of the sun, right?
Stay out of the sun or lather up.
So what they've said, right? And lather up your kids, and, because skin cancer will, is you don't want to get skin cancer. But I'm going to tell you something. Just something that we quoted in Serial Killers. More people die from a lack of vitamin D, the sunshine, right, than die from skin cancer, let me tell you. And the people that die from skin cancer, the worst type of the melanoma, are people that work indoors. It's not people that go in the sun. It's not the farmer.
And that's the funny thing. They're all low in vitamin D.
Right? They're all extremely low in vitamin D. Those are the people that get skin cancer. Isn't it crazy?
I think that very similar to, I think that they tried to oversimplify skin cancer. They just blame it on the sun. Not lifestyle factors, not chemicals, not food. Again, the skin is an organ. It's the largest organ. So if the food that we eat and the chemicals we consume can affect our lungs, can affect our kidneys and our liver, then they definitely can affect our largest organ, which is our skin. Yeah. So it's not as simple as just putting sunscreen on. Yeah. That's for sure. And definitely, as we said in the newsletter, sunscreen and chlorine does not mix. It doesn't mix.
Yeah, and what else doesn't mix?
Well, that's the thing. Right? They haven't tested it. Yeah, they don't know.
You see, you folks, when you read a label, and you can't pronounce the names, so you don't read it very much. But if you look at a product, whether it's sunscreen or something else, chemicals are deemed to be safe on their own. Right?
Like yes, in an isolation lab.
In an isolation lab, like so-and-so, parabens, they're safe.
Yeah, I have a chemical.
Die from parabens.
That's right. I have a chemical. Yeah. I have to prove it safe. Yeah. So I prove it safe. But I don't have to prove it safe with every other chemical that's out there. And believe me, there's a lot of chemicals out there.
And so they combine them all, right? And look at Johnson & Johnson just settled over $100 million.
One of the largest all time. I might be the largest.
Right? With what was it? Their talcum powder or their baby lotion.
That's right.
folks.
Again, they throw the word baby on there. People think it's safe.
Yeah.
Right? They think it's a safe thing.
I remember this Dr. Gideon. That's why I remember his name, Gideon, pediatrician and one of the top specialists at the Children's Hospital in Toronto. Was talking about all these chemicals. This is 20 years ago. I remember reading some of his stuff. He said, baby lotion, what? And he would say, what are parents thinking? Using that stuff on kids.
Well, and then you
put
throw
it
them
on
in the
their
sun.
skin,
And
right?
yeah.
Anyway.
But anyways, this is a long way of saying that the chemicals definitely can have an effect on the thyroid. And there's not a lot of research what happens when you mix all these chemicals, you go out into the sun, or you throw in certain other conditions. We don't know, right? We don't know and that's the issue that we're having. But we're seeing the end result of it, which is a 100-fold increase in thyroid cancer over the last so many years. And then, thyroid cancer rates tripling. Breast cancer is increasing. Again,
100-fold.
Whenever I hear we've won the war on cancer, I just get frustrated. I actually have to, it's funny. I have, I got an Apple Watch, and it's funny because, the Apple Watch, keeps track of your pulse. And what's funny is that, and that's not even it. I have it set up so it sends me a notification if my pulse rises. My watch will literally send a notification. It'll tell me to breathe. And it's funny because sometimes I'll be reading these studies and my watch will tell me to breathe because I get so frustrated because they're barking up the wrong tree so many times. So many times. Like when, we just put out that newsletter on coconut oil, and when we were doing the research on it, my watch told me to breathe like 3 times. I was so frustrated.
Well, I don't have the Apple Watch, but I can tell you.
No, it is funny.
I'm telling you, my blood pressure is skyrocketing when I start reading some of these things. It is absolute nonsense, folks. Absolute nonsense.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us on this episode. We stayed mostly on point. We did a little bit of a sidetrack on sunscreen, but that's a big thing as well. We had a lot of feedback on that, a lot of questions on that as well. So, again, we want to thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you can email us at info@martinclinic.com. Also, if you're not, you can check us on Facebook. You do a Facebook Live every Thursday, and you answer a ton of questions.
Yep.
So you could jump on there, and, if you follow us on Facebook, you can get notifications when you
I usually get pretty riled up Thursday.
Oh
morning.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that that goes on. So anyways, you can join us there. If you're not a newsletter subscriber, you can go to our website martinclinic.com and sign up there, and you can get our newsletters as well. So again, thank you for joining us, and have a great day. You've been listening to the Martin Clinic Wellness Podcast, brought to you by martinclinic.com. We are truly thankful that you took the time out of your busy day to listen. Talk soon.